What does it look like to minister in the midst of mental illness? This week, I'm joined by Scot Box, founder of WorshipHero, as he shares his story of what it looks like when Jesus shows up in the midst of your brokenness. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome to FrontStage BackStage. I am your host, Jason Daye, and here we're all about encouraging and equipping pastors just like you to embrace healthy, well-balanced, sustainable leadership for both your life and your ministry. We're blessed to be a part of the Pastor Serve Network, and you can find information about all of our shows, all of our episodes, and even a free download for a toolkit so that you can dig more deeply into the conversation we're having today. You can find all that at pastorserve.org/network. So be sure to check that out. And then if you're joining us on YouTube, we encourage you to give us a like and feel free to comment during our conversation below. And whether you're on YouTube or joining us on your favorite podcasting platform, be sure to subscribe so that you do not miss out on any of these insightful conversations like the one that we are having today. I'm super excited to be welcoming Scot Box to join us in today's conversation. Scot is the founder of WorshipHero and also the author of Heroic Disgrace. And so super excited to have Scot joining us today. Scot, welcome.
Thanks, Jason. Thrilled to be with you, sir.
Awesome, brother. Now, super excited to hear your story. And that's really what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be hearing your story. You've taken the time to put it down in pen and paper in this book. And I tell you, I talked to you a little bit before we jumped on how much I appreciate just your willingness to share your journey. And it's an important journey, I think. Not just because it's you, Scot, and you're awesome, but just the idea of you sharing the experiences that you've had and the challenges that you've had, and how those play into life and how those play into ministry. And so I believe that our conversation is going to be an encouragement to many who are watching along today. So I appreciate you being here. Now, Scot, early in your life, you share that you had this kind of idea of being a hero, of living life as a hero. So talk to us a little bit about kind of your upbringing and these kind of heroic ideals that you initially had.
To say that I was born with it is the truth. I was genetically predisposed to hear what I eventually call, even if it wasn't the most healthy thing, it was the Frankenstein version of it. But I had a family that they were public servants, and even my dad, who wasn't in the military and wasn't a police officer like earlier generations had been, went into Christian higher education and was just a servant, dad, and a statesman. And that's one of the things. I kind of bookend my story with my dad and my journey with him. But this idea of heroism is something that, well, and here's the other thing. I'm a firstborn. And so birth order does play some of this, into some of this as well. I don't know if you can identify, but I'm sure some of the audience can identify with that too.
Right, definitely. So this idea of being a hero, you're kind of born into it, as you said. You're kind of living into it as you're growing up, as you're experiencing life. And yet then you begin to experience some things in life that didn't seem to completely add up to this idea of being a hero. In fact, some things that might have appeared to be emotional struggles, anxiety, panic, these types of things. Talk to us a little bit about when and how those began to enter into your life and what you began kind of processing as you were experiencing those things.
Yeah, you bet. So, I mean, the first thing is when I started to lose. Like I was always the biggest kid. I was always winning, and so there was that. And then there was this realization that I was also kind of. I don't know if it's not that age of accountability necessarily thing theologically. It's just that sense one point in my life, probably when I was in my teenage years, where I was realizing the seriousness of sin.
Right.
And, you know, and a lot of that, I'll just be honest, a lot of that was around the topic of lust, you know, and pornography and all of that stuff just started, that entered into my life. And then later on, after meeting my wife and getting married, there was some brokenness that I couldn't explain,
Hmm.
that wasn't associated, I thought, at least, with sin. It was that things up here weren't right, and obviously that's partly why we're talking.
Right.
But I was in ministry. I believed that I would be in ministry since I was a little kid. Uh, but I was going to be a heroic minister, Jason.
Right, right. I can understand that. We often envision as we go into ministry that, we're going to change the world,
Oh yeah,
and then God says, no, really, I just want you to be faithful. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
about that?
yeah, exactly. Let's stick with just being faithful. So,
Yeah.
so that's good. Now, Scott, in your story, you share that whenever you met your wife and you and Carrie Ann got married, you began to feel this sense that you're not going to be all that
Yeah.
that your wife needed in a husband, or all that maybe she would be expecting for in a husband. Talk to us a little bit about going through that kind of.
Yeah, you bet. So, for me, I mean, we joke that the honeymoon lasted about an hour, and the truth of the matter is that's about as long as it lasted for me. I Fear was a real deal for me, Jason. I didn't, and I imagine a lot of us, I've heard from other men who are married that they had similar experiences where it's like, oh my gosh, what did I do? I'm stuck now. That type of thing. Mine wasn't necessarily that I was stuck. It was that I don't believe that I can. For, ours was connected to our actual honeymoon. The destination was Cabo, Mexico. So we left the States and we show up in Mexico, and I'm a young man. I mean, I've been out of the country a couple times, but not on my own, and
Right,
not
right.
with this absolutely hot babe on my shoulder, on my elbow, and respectfully. But I mean, my word, we get into this cab, and when you leave Cabo, it might be this way today. I haven't been back, but uh, when you leave the airport, it goes dark, and you're you're out on the way to the resorts, but you're not in the resorts yet. And there was that sense of, dear God, if this guy tries to pull something, I got nothing in return. I got nothing to defend myself and my wife. And that fear was a really big thing that hit me. It was the closest that I had gotten to a panic attack. Now that on the back end of having had multiple panic attacks, I saw that was the beginning of those experiences. Started in a cab on
Wow,
the way
wow,
to
right.
the
And
resort.
so you've talked a little bit about winning a lot, and I know in the book you talk a little bit about the pride behind that, and
Oh
so
yeah.
the losing piece was the challenge, and now you're talking a little bit about fear. So we have kind of pride, we have fear, we have these two pieces that are both obviously competing for our head space and our heart space, right? In the midst of all these things, so. Talk to us a little bit as you kind of continued as a young man. When did you begin to see some of these things flaring up in even more pronounced ways in your life that it became something that you and your wife said, "Hey, we need to figure out what this is," right?
Get this figured out.
Yeah.
Right. So I think the best kind of connection point, Jason, is just to offer up a time period. So I was 25 when things really had ramped up. So Carrie Ann and I were married at 22. I was 22 and she was 20. And so things had progressively been getting more difficult. And when I say difficult, things had gone high and things had gone low. I've been diagnosed bipolar manic depressive. So there we go. I'll spill the beans
Right.
there. But before diagnosis, during those first 2-3 years, and then following until when I was roughly 30, uh, we didn't have a diagnosis, and things were progressively getting worse in those highs and those lows. And in particular, one of the things that was there were two things. One was impulsivity, where I just go off the rails with impulse stuff, self discipline out the door, uh, and I mean I gained tons and tons of weight. Uh, Irritation became another giant thing where lights were brighter, sounds were louder. I had to get naked, just get me out of my clothes. Those were weird. Those were
Right.
weird
Yeah.
things, and they felt like giant losses. And keep in mind that I'm also on platform leading music on a weekly basis.
Right.
And th- so Carrie Ann and I actually, just to answer your primary question there, I think we we actually didn't start looking for help. I mean, we weren't stupid, but we didn't know where to go. We didn't
Right.
know that there was help. We just thought this was normal marriage stuff. This was stuff everybody dealt with, right? Uh, so we actually accidentally fell into a counselor. We were looking to adopt a child from Haiti, and part of the thing that you had to do is just check the box that you're mentally stable to have a child come
Right.
and into your home. And that then after going through that process of trying to find a placement for a child, we ended up not adopting. We ended up being pregnant and starting our own family without not going through the adoption process. But that's how we ended up in a psychologist's office who's become one of our best friends. And about 6 months into that process, Jason, she just said, Scott, maybe we should go ahead and just pursue a diagnosis and just see what that's like. And I said, yes,
Right.
yes, let's go.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit. What was it like to put a name to or a
Yeah.
diagnosis to what you were, wrestling with in life?
It was a blessing. I,
Yeah.
I know for some people, Jason, it might be like a death blow. And I have to be honest, they weren't telling me I was terminal. I they were telling me I had a health issue, a mental issue. I had specifically chemicals that were imbalanced in my brain, and that when they gave me a name, one, it felt great to have a title for it. Oh, there's actually this is called something. Okay,
Right.
cool.
Right.
And then after that, then there's also the realization that there's a there's a strategy. There's a way forward. Oh, there's medication, and for the record too, the medication component was difficult for me at initially. I was not interested in that, and I'd be happy to talk about that
Yeah,
too. But
yeah. It's interesting, Scott, as you're kind of processing through that, and I'm kind of reflecting and thinking about those who might be watching or listening in right now, and
yeah,
and who might be going through similar experiences, right? Whether or not they've been diagnosed, but they're serving in ministry, they're in a relationship, they're married, whatever it might be, and they're experiencing these same types of things or similar things. What um, what advice do you have now that you've kind of processed through this? You navigated this. You went through the ups and the downs, and then finally came to a point where you received a diagnosis. And what advice would you give to someone who is wrestling with all of this themselves or something
yeah,
similar, especially as a pastor or someone in ministry, right?
yeah. Oh, I got one for you.
Okay.
I here's the thing. This is the I'm so glad you asked that, because here's the miracle of bipolar disorder in my life. I reached the end of myself. And for me, there's that sense of desperation that I realized that I was designed to have. I didn't just need more of Jesus in my life. Everybody needs a little more Jesus in their life. But that's the thing. I recognize we were designed to be desperate for Jesus.
Mm.
And this is one of the most revealing things for me, trying to be a self-made hero, trying to be the man that could come through on platform every single stinking week.
Right.
And I needed to realize I didn't have to have all the answers. Jesus is supposed to have all those answers. And doggone it, I'm supposed to model that desperation because I was designed for it.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. One of the things that you share in your book is you say that the stigma associated with mental disorders became more challenging. What do you mean by that? And I think we could talk a little bit about this, because there is this certain stigma when it comes to mental disorders, and especially the idea of there's a term that's thrown around, unfit for ministry, right?
Yes.
If someone's unfit for ministry.
Right.
And sometimes the idea of a stigma of a mental disorder and this idea of being unfit for ministry kind of come together. What were you learning? What were you experiencing? And then what would you share with us, when we're thinking about and trying to hold those thoughts together?
Gosh, another great question. Thank you. I mean, these are such important questions to dive into. Here's my thought. My thought is that if somebody with a mental illness can model desperation for Jesus in such a way that another pastor who's not desperate for Jesus, that it isn't modeling that desperation, I'll go with the guy who's mentally ill.
Right.
Because he's modeling a desperation. So here's what this did for me as a worship leader. I constantly became more and more, I wasn't disillusioned, but disappointed with the worship that I was leading, Jason. I was leading people. I want to be sensitive to this because I've done this for 25 years.
Right.
And I thankfully, I don't have a job that I need. I'm not like, I don't need to stay on staff at a church. But my point is just that I continually kept going, well, is my music actually changing people's lives? And I realized that there's a place for music in the church. But ultimately, what I realized as a worship leader is that if worship is not a lifestyle, then what the heck am I doing? If I'm not actually guiding people toward a better witness, then my worship leading is probably close to worthless. I mean, just being honest, this was one of the big revelations. And that then was that sense of like, okay, this is so upside down. I used to think I needed to be this certain type of hero. I used to think that I was too broken to be this type of leader. And then Jesus comes along in my pursuit and reflection of him. And he goes, guess what? I got you.
Right.
This is how you can lead worship in a way that actually is more akin to the way that I lived my worship, Scott. This is Jesus going, I modeled worship by pursuing the Father, by reflecting the Father in everything that I do.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. And as you're talking there, Scott, I couldn't help but think of, this idea of as Paul wrote, the idea of that in my weakness is where we see the strength of Christ, right? And so in my brokenness is where we can really see the visible activity of the Spirit of God at work in my life. And it sounds from your story that your experience with mental disorder and bipolar, being bipolar, was this idea that you could stop trying to be the hero, right? And that you could rest in the grace and the mercy and the goodness of Jesus. Let him be the hero through you. Let him be magnified through your brokenness. Is that what the
Yes.
experience has been for you?
Yes. And I want to be very clear too that uh, this idea of it still needs to be active. I can't just be passive in this. I have to recognize, and I've recognized that we are, let me put it this way. I'm proof that God makes healthy what he doesn't heal. Now, I believe God could heal me. I
Right,
absolutely
right,
believe that. But I also believe he probably won't. And the reason is because I've seen that through my pain.
right,
I wouldn't need him if I didn't have bipolar disorder. I'd fall back on my own stupid definition of heroism again.
right,
I know I
right.
would. And so I think that's part of this journey as a Christian leader that I've realized too is I'm not just talking about mental health either. I'm talking about body health and spiritual health.
Right.
And that idea of that tripod, if you will, if you kick out one of those legs, yeah, you are unhealthy. But the other component is even if you're unhealthy or struggle with an illness in one area, you can be healthy in the other areas. And that's been such a there's been so much freedom in that, Jason.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I can see that, and I love the fact that you brought up that idea of healing, because one of the things that you write about in the book is this idea where you come to this point, with your doctor and your
Yeah.
team about the idea of managing versus healing,
Yeah.
where you realize that, as you said, yes, God could heal me in a moment, but my experience is more for me, and it's not unlike many other people. You know what I mean? Some people feel healed of mental illness or physical illness. Some people do not. Right? It's one of the mysteries of God, which we accept and we live into. But for you, it was this idea of managing your mental disorder. So
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about that idea. And first of all, kind of coming to terms with that, and then proactively, what does that look like for you as you are seeking to honor God? Not only in your family, but also in this idea of ministry.
Yeah. Management is the key. Self-discipline for all of us
Right.
uh, is critical, and I know that now more than ever after having lived with a diagnosis for 15 years. Management is the key. I and this is one of the cool things about my journey with my medical team. Pardon me, is that we designed some things with Carrie Ann, my wife, in the room. Like we've always done counseling together. There have been 2, 3 rare occasions where I needed a 911, just show up and talk to the counselor on my own. But this idea of management has included her. There have been these. I don't even remember what we call it, but the best way to explain it is chunking. We just take chunks of the day, and I know I have to brush my teeth 3 times a day. I know I have to drink a gallon of water. I could do it all before bed. That would be really stupid, but I need to do that every day. I need to get 30 to 90 minutes of exercise in so that I'm not 300 pounds anymore. And I don't have to deal with sleep apnea or, acid reflux that destroys my vocal cords. you know, uh,
Right.
these are management things that and here's the intersection for me of mental illness and worship.
Hmm.
What I've recognized is that my mental illness gave me a pathway to understanding worship earlier, or maybe better than I would have had I not been or struggled with mental disorder. It forced my lifestyle to get fixed. It forced a desperation upon Jesus that I never would have had. The- I hope I'm circling back around so that that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And what I love about that, Scott, is you're kind of talking about, the backstage of your life. You're talking about this idea
Yes.
of being
Yes.
intentional
Yeah.
about
Yes.
who I am. Being intentional about tending to my physical health, tending to my mental health, my emotional health, all those pieces, my key relationships, my relationship with my family. So, and and what we see, and we see all too often in the church world, unfortunately, is um, oftentimes a pastor or minister can look good on the front stage, right, and kind of keep things rolling along on the front stage,
Absolutely.
but backstage is can be a mess, and at some point that catches up, and that's when people get hurt, and people become much more vulnerable to devastation of sin and whatever else might come with that. So I love, one of the things that's fascinating about your story is I love the fact that your diagnosis helped you, as you said, kind of um, become more aware and more cognizant of the need to, which all of us need, to be focusing on our own soul care, to be focusing on our
Yes.
own lives and how we relate to those around us and what that looks like. So, what are some of as you've processed through this and worked through this, what are some of the practices, even like spiritual practices, maybe?
Yeah.
Because I know that you spend a lot of time, especially in your ministry, kind of focusing on this idea of reflecting Jesus and those types of things. So, talk to us a little bit about
Yeah.
those spiritual practices and what worship really has become and what you've learned about worship.
I think that witness, Jason, is far more connected to worship than we give credit, give it credit for. In other words, in even within us as pastors, we use the phrase worship and we mean music. We mean song time at church. We just do. And or it's we put it up on the reader boards at our church. By the way, I hate reader boards. Anyway, uh, but it says worship 10 a.m. and you're like, oh, okay. Worship, witness is so. Jesus modeled a witness, a lifestyle that we must teach as worship. And he, I'm gonna. I'm 45 years old. I am right on that area of I will be replaced by the next generation very very soon, and it's just it's the way that it works. There's always a younger generation who's sexier. And our voices wear out, and we're just not cool anymore. The church is where they spit us, chew us up, spit us out. I get it, and I'm close friends with numerous pastors, worship pastors, who are no longer pastors anymore,
Mm.
and that has devastated me because I didn't want to be one of those guys, and I recognized, and this isn't a slam against them. I just recognized I think there's something that we're missing in our worship, that if if I if all I do is connect my music with my worship, and worship with my music, then yeah, I need to become more. I need to understand worship at the level Jesus modeled it. Uh, and so that then has, I think, back to your question, you might have to remind me and re-steer me, but that has ordered the life that I've lived. It drove me to trying to create a ministry, and I'm still trying to figure this out. But how can we? harness our witness as worship leaders, and then elevate ourselves so that we can leave worship in a more healthy place for the next generation than it was left to us.
Wow.
And I say, Jason, there is this aspect then of being able to, I want to turn this back over to you, but being able to harness our stories and create storytellers rather than just singers.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Scott, talk to me a little bit about, what encouragement would you have, reflecting on this growth of the idea of worship, that you've experienced, and this heart for wanting to, as you're maybe exiting out of your season of ministry, leaving it better for the generation coming behind, those types of things. What encouragement would you have for pastors who are kind of processing through that and thinking about their, all of us, we have an expiration date, right? There's going to be a time when we aren't doing what we're doing now. So you seem to have thought through this and processed through this to a great degree. So what advice or encouragement would you have for pastors who are doing something similar?
The other day I was in the gym, and it's really cool because there's a gym that focuses most on classes. So, and I don't do classes. So I'll show up midday when they don't do classes, and it's an empty gym, and which is super cool. So I don't have to talk to people and put my headphones on, listen to you, Jason. This is what I like to do when I'm working out. Anyhow, I run into, so I'm on the rowing machine, and this body just shows up off to the right side, and it just keeps kind of getting closer. And next thing I know, I'm being hugged. And there's a story as to why I'm being hugged, but which is kind of irrelevant to this. But there's a dude invading my space who is a great friend that didn't care about the personal bubble, obviously. And then he and I proceed to start talking, and I'm looking at his eyes, and he's got the brightest yellow eyes. It's actually hard to look at. He's going through the stages of liver failure.
Right.
And there was this sense of, oh man. So he's hugging me, and he's just kind of down. I'm going somewhere with this. He was defeated. And I don't know if he thinks he's at the end of his life. He might be. He probably is. But as we talked, I felt the spirit. I don't want to over spiritualize this. I felt this sense that my friend needed to hear that this was his moment. That this is your moment. This pain that you're going through. This is your witness. This is your opportunity to worship. This is your moment of heroism. And maybe you've had other moments, but for goodness sakes, your ministry does not stop when the door of the church, if you will, the church building hits you on the backside on your way out. Right. Or even if you leave in a good, awesome way, which is, I know, difficult. That often doesn't happen. Many of us leave and just get smoked. And part of that's on us. But
right.
But ministry must not end, even when our eyes are stinking yellow.
Yeah.
That's my encouragement. Tell your story to the bitter end or the most amazing end.
Whichever it may be. Yeah.
Whatever it may be, because it's not bitter. This is why I do feel, Jason, this sense that if worship is not connected to eternity in some capacity, if our sense of worship is not connected to eternity, it is incomplete.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Man, we certainly appreciate your insights, especially on worship and what God has taught you as you've kind of been on this amazing journey. Just as we kind of close down,
yes,
just to kind of bring this full circle a little bit. Pastors and ministry leaders who might be wrestling with their own mental disorder, their own mental illness. What would you say to them right now?
Yeah. I think one of the universal truths that we all can struggle with is that it can become too late. Uh, I know we don't like to deal with that, but the reality is that in life, things can become too late to change, too late to get healthy. Uh, and my encouragement to your audience, to our audience right now, is
Hmm.
to recognize that truth and to fight for health, because God will give you health, even if healing doesn't come. Even if healing is the most absurd impossibility, health in some capacity is always an option. And finally, I'll say this: even if you've had your dreams crushed, you can grieve those dreams, but not for too long. Dream new dreams.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it because you're kind of living a testament to how God shows up in the midst of that brokenness, right? In the midst of your ideal of what it was going to mean to be a hero, and
No.
and how that kind of faded away, but then you experienced something much more incredible, something you never would have imagined, as you allowed Jesus to be the hero of your life and to shine that light not only in you, but through you. So that's beautiful, Scot. Love that. Scot, if people want to connect with you, your ministry, learn more about your book, what's the best way for them to do that?
You bet. HeroicDisgrace.com is where you can find me. And I do most of my communication on Facebook at WorshipHero. So there you go. It'd be great to connect. I finally want to say this one thing. I am humbled by this opportunity to share. I do not have this figured out, and I would love it if we could journey together and join in this adventure together. This has been amazing, Jason. Thank you.
That's awesome, Scot. I certainly appreciate that. And we'll have links to everything that Scot mentioned and resources. And you can find all of that at pastorserve.org/network, where you can actually download our weekly toolkit that actually helps you and your ministry team dive more deeply into this conversation that Scot and I just had. So that'll be available to you there as well. So once again, we thank you, Scot, for hanging out with us, sharing your story. We thank you for your transparency and your openness, and for the opportunity you have to just declare how good God is. In the midst of things that we could say, we're going to throw in the towel and just live in a state of, life just isn't good enough. Instead, you allowed Jesus to come in a powerful way and take you to an experience that you never dreamed you'd have. So that is just, I love just the redemption story of God. God is a redeemer. That's what he does. And you've shared that so much in your own life. So thank you for making the time to be with us, Scot. We appreciate it.
You bet, Jason.
Now, before you go, I want to remind you of an incredible free resource that our team puts together every single week to help you and your team dig more deeply and maximize the conversation that we just had. This is the weekly toolkit that we provide, and we understand that it's one thing to listen or watch an episode, but it's something entirely different to actually take what you've heard, what you've watched, what you've seen, and apply it to your life and to your ministry. You see, FrontStage BackStage is more than just a podcast or YouTube show about ministry leadership. We are a complete resource to help train you and your entire ministry team as you seek to grow and develop in life and ministry. Every single week, we provide a weekly toolkit, which has all types of tools in it to help you do just that. Now, you can find this at pastorserve.org/network. That's pastorserve.org/network. And there you'll find all of our shows, all of our episodes, and all of our weekly toolkits. Now, inside the toolkit are several tools, including video links and audio links for you to share with your team. There are resource links about different resources and tools that were mentioned in the conversation, several other tools, but the greatest thing is the Ministry Leaders Growth Guide. Our team pulls key insights and concepts from every conversation with our amazing guests. And then we also create engaging questions for you and your team to consider and process, providing space for you to reflect on how that episode's topic relates to your unique context at your local church, in your ministry, and in your life. Now, you can use these questions in your regular staff meetings to guide your conversation as you invest in the growth of your ministry leaders. You can find the weekly toolkit at pastorserve.org/network. We encourage you to check out that free resource. Until next time, I'm Jason Daye, encouraging you to love well, live well, and lead well. God bless.